The story begins with Kyungmin arriving at school, only to find his classmate, Daisuk, standing on the rooftop. The sight immediately brings back memories of the bullying Daisuk endured at the hands of Junyong and his friends.
전따봉 전달식을 진행하도록 하겠습니다.
Sometime earlier, Junyong had openly disrespected a substitute teacher. Daisuk, known as a model student, stepped in to defend her and ended up punching Junyong. That single act of courage came with a heavy price. Enraged, Junyong and his group brutally beat Daisuk. Kyungmin wanted to report the bullying to the teachers, but he changed his mind after overhearing a conversation in the staff room. The teachers were already struggling. Since corporal punishment had been banned, many students had become increasingly disrespectful and difficult to control. Worse still, teachers were often bullied themselves, both physically and emotionally, especially by students from wealthy and influential families. There had even been a case where a female teacher was stabbed to death by one of her students, yet the incident was never properly addressed by either the police or the government. Back in the present, Daisuk finally reaches his breaking point. Tired of being tormented, he chooses to end his life right in front of his classmates. Not long after Daisuk's death, Kyungmin becomes the next target. He is humiliated in class, forced to drink alcohol, and constantly mocked by his classmates. The abuse becomes so overwhelming that he starts thinking about ending everything himself. At one point, he is shocked to realize that he has somehow found himself standing on the rooftop. Panicked, he quickly comes back down and returns to class, only to be viciously beaten by a student named Kwang-soo. Even after Kyungmin apologizes, Kwang-soo refuses to stop. He keeps punching him and even dares him to fight back. Then out of nowhere, a man named Hua Jin steps in and strikes Kwang-soo. Furious, Kwang-soo immediately tries to retaliate, but Hua Jin drops him with a single punch. Refusing to be embarrassed in front of everyone, Kwang-soo gets back up and attacks again, only to be sent crashing down by a powerful slap. The entire class is left stunned. Kwang-soo is an MMA fighter, yet Hua Jin defeats him effortlessly. A short time later, Junyong arrives and assumes Hua Jin is a teacher. Since teachers are not allowed to hit students, Junyong orders his friends to start recording. He believes they have just captured enough evidence to ruin Hua Jin. Instead of backing down, Hua Jin does the exact opposite. He continues beating Kwang-soo right in front of everyone, almost as if he wants the whole thing recorded. Soon after, the teachers arrive at the scene, and Hua Jin immediately introduces himself as an inspector from the Educational Rights Protection Bureau, who has just been assigned to the school. The Bureau specializes in handling school bullying cases, especially situations where students lose their lives due to bullying, while schools and local authorities attempt to cover up the truth. Hua Jin has arrived to make things right. This is Teach You a Lesson. However, Hua Jin explains that he has been granted special authority to use whatever methods are necessary to discipline students. If advice is enough to make them listen, he will use advice. But if force is the only language they understand, he is prepared to use force as well. To everyone's surprise, even the principal and teachers have never heard of the Bureau before. The principal insists that there is no bullying at their school, pointing out that most of the students come from respected and influential families. Despite that, Hua Jin decides that he will personally take charge of Daisuk's class. The decision immediately makes the principal nervous because Junyong, the son of a powerful lawmaker and leading presidential candidate, is a student in that class. Hua Jin, however, seems completely unconcerned by the political pressure surrounding him. On his first day in the classroom, Hua Jin directly asks why Daisuk chose to take his own life. He already knows that Daisuk was being bullied. However, a student named Hak Jai quickly denies it and insults Daisuk, claiming that he was simply a weak student who became overwhelmed by poor grades. Annoyed by the comment, Hua Jin immediately teaches Hak Jai a lesson and announces that every student in the room is now under the Bureau's scrutiny. He then orders the entire class to do push-ups. Junyong, convinced that he holds more power than Hua Jin, openly tells his classmates to ignore the order. According to Junyong, they do not have time for such nonsense because they need to focus on preparing for exams. Hua Jin does not care. Instead, he disciplines Junyong right in front of everyone. Hua Jin believes that fear comes from experience. Since Junyong has never experienced the fear and helplessness felt by Daisuk and the other victims, Hua Jin decides to give him a taste of it himself. Afterward, he repeats the order for push-ups. This time, even Junyong obeys. Later during lunch, Junyong and his friends cut in front of other students to get food first. Once again, Hua Jin calls them out. Frustrated, Junyong throws away his food, but Hua Jin shoves him into a trash can. When Junyong's uniform becomes filthy, Hua Jin deliberately wipes it clean with a mop, humiliating him in front of the entire school. It is the exact same humiliation that Junyong once forced Daisuk to endure. That evening, Hua Jin visits Junyong's father, Kwang Pil, to report that Junyong skipped his assigned cleaning duties. Hua Jin explains that he is simply fulfilling his responsibilities as a teacher, and Junyong should do the same as a student. Instead of accepting responsibility, Junyong tells his father that Hua Jin has been accusing him of being involved in Daisuk's death. Rather than arguing with them, Hua Jin drags Junyong back to school and forces him to finish cleaning the toilets. Furious over the humiliation, Junyong deliberately slams his own head against a toilet to create an injury and get back at Hua Jin. The next day, Kwang Pil arrives at the school and immediately blames Hua Jin for his son's injuries. Hua Jin calmly explains that Junyong caused the injury himself by smashing his own head into a toilet, but Kwang Pil has no interest in hearing the truth. Instead, he threatens to remove Hua Jin from his position and shut down the bureau entirely. After watching his father confront Hua Jin, Junyong regains his confidence. He and his friends once again begin acting like they own the school, continuing to bully Kyungmin without fear of consequences. Unable to endure the abuse any longer, Kyungmin makes his way to the rooftop. As he stands there, however, fear suddenly takes over. Before he can do anything drastic, Hua Jin arrives and pulls him away from the edge. It turns out Hua Jin already knows that Kyungmin has been a constant target of Junyong and his group. He tries to encourage the boy to stand up for himself, but Kyungmin feels powerless. In his eyes, there is no way to fight back against someone whose father holds so much influence. Meanwhile, Kwang Pil meets with the Minister of Education, Mr. Choi, and angrily demands that the bureau be dissolved. He complains that one of the inspectors assigned to his son's school has gone far beyond acceptable limits. Kwang Pil even threatens to force Mr. Choi into early retirement. Mr. Choi, however, remains completely unfazed. The following day, just as Kwang Pil is preparing for an election campaign event, a series of scandals connected to him suddenly become public knowledge. At that very moment, Mr. Choi personally confronts him, revealing that he was the one who leaked the information to the media. Kwang Pil is furious. Not only are they members of the same political party, but he never expected such a betrayal. Mr. Choi does not care. He reminds Kwang Pil that the party has spent years covering up his mistakes and corruption. If Kwang Pil had not abused his power and acted above the law, none of this would have happened. Soon afterward, Kwang Pil is arrested for the many scandals he had managed to hide for years. With his father's influence gone, Junyong suddenly finds himself abandoned. The same students who once feared him now begin targeting him with the very kind of bullying he inflicted on others. Consumed by rage, Junyong pours gasoline throughout the classroom and prepares to burn down the school. To his shock, Hua Jin deliberately ignites the fuel. As the flames spread closer and closer, Junyong finally experiences genuine fear. For the first time, he understands what it feels like to be helpless. It is then revealed that after Daisuk fought back against him, Junyong complained to his father, who used his influence to make life miserable for Daisuk's family. Desperate to protect them, Daisuk begged Junyong for mercy, but Junyong showed none. Instead, he continued tormenting him until Daisuk saw no way out. Hua Jin explains that the bureau exists for one reason. Those who bully others must be forced to experience the consequences of their actions and take responsibility for the damage they have caused. Not long afterward, Junyong and his friends are arrested for the bullying that ultimately drove a student to his death. Their names, photographs, and records are publicly displayed on the Bureau's official website. Their criminal records will remain there indefinitely unless the victims choose to forgive them. With the case finally resolved, Hua Jin quietly leaves the school. After completing his mission, he disappears without a trace. Sometime later, videos showing Junyong and his friends bullying other students spread rapidly across the internet. Footage of Hua Jin's methods and the way he handled the case also goes viral. The incident sparks intense public debate. Some people support the Bureau's actions, while others criticize its existence. The controversy grows even larger because many believe the country's education system has already failed. During a media interview, Mr. Choi openly condemns the increasing number of crimes occurring in schools. He also points to the collapse of teacher authority, explaining that many students now see themselves as untouchable, especially because laws designed to protect children and students are often exploited to shield bad behavior. Mr. Choi insists that the Bureau exists to protect the right to teach and learn. Its goal is to create an environment where students, teachers, and everyone involved in education can focus on learning without fear of violence or even losing their lives. However, despite his noble intentions, Mr. Choi begins facing opposition from powerful figures within his own political party. Some of them see both him and the Bureau as potential threats to their future interests. Meanwhile, a transfer student named Gunde arrives for his first day at Goon Technical High School, a place widely known as the worst school in the country. The school's reputation is well earned. Most of its students behave more like gang members than teenagers. They openly defy teachers, refuse to study, flirt with female staff members, and regularly settle disputes through violence. Amid the chaos, a timid student named Hyung-ju takes the time to explain the situation to Gunde. According to him, students from different departments constantly fight each other in hopes of earning recognition and eventually being recruited by a former student named Kwon-yuk, who has already become a real gangster. The two main groups are led by In-bom from the electrical engineering department and Song-won from the automotive department. Because the violence has become so severe that it disrupts classes and even threatens teacher safety, the principal eventually contacts the bureau for help. By the time the request is made, Hua Jin is already there and fully aware of the situation. After hearing the principal's explanation, he casually states that he will handle everything by himself. The principal is far from convinced. At the same time, a large fight between the rival groups is nearing its conclusion, with In-bom's side close to victory. Then In-bom suddenly receives a message from Kwon-yuk inviting him to an interview. The news excites In-bom and his friends immediately. To them, it is a chance to move one step closer to joining the gang. Song-won, on the other hand, is furious after losing. He takes out his frustration on Gunde and several other students. He even uses Hyung-ju as a punching bag, forcing him to absorb blow after blow from the group. Seeing how badly Hyung-ju is suffering, Gunde helps him get home safely. As a way of thanking him, Hyung-ju invites Gunde inside for a simple meal of instant noodles. The next day, Hua Jin arrives at the school, and it is revealed that he already knows Gunde. An even bigger surprise follows. Gunde is actually an undercover bureau inspector. He has been posing as a student while secretly collecting evidence of violence using a tiny camera hidden inside his glasses. During lunch, Gunde deliberately provokes Song-won and his friends, leading them toward the school gymnasium, where Hua Jin is already waiting. Once everyone is inside, Hua Jin locks the doors behind them and calmly tells them to take their seats. Class is about to begin. As Hua Jin introduces himself, In-bom immediately recognizes him as the bureau inspector who publicly disciplined the son of a former lawmaker involved in a major bullying case. Even so, In-bom and the others are completely unimpressed. They have no interest in school or authority figures. Their goal is to become gangsters like Kwon-yuk. Without hesitation, they charge at Hua Jin. The outcome is exactly what everyone should have expected. Hua Jin effortlessly knocks them all down without breaking a sweat. Afterward, he presents them with a schedule designed to help them catch up on their studies after skipping so many classes. As he prepares to leave, In-bom and Song-won attempt a sneak attack from behind. To their surprise, Hua Jin easily avoids the attack and puts both of them on the ground once again. Classes eventually begin, but the troublemakers claim they do not have any books or pens. Hua Jin responds by teaching each of them another lesson. His most memorable lesson is reserved for In-bom and Song-won. He forces them into a car and takes them on a terrifying high-speed ride. The experience is meant to scare them into understanding that education is not something to be mocked and that teachers deserve respect. In front of the entire student body, Hua Jin explains that students do not get to decide whether education is useful or not. Every lesson they learn today could become valuable in their future. His words leave a strong impression on many of the students. For the first time, some of them begin taking their education seriously. Unfortunately, In-bom and Song-won still have not completely changed. Before long, they secretly resume bullying Hyung-ju. Just as Hua Jin is about to punish them again, Hyung-ju unexpectedly steps in and defends them. Later, he explains to Gunde that he does not want anyone wasting more time on fights and punishments. In his view, every minute spent at school is better spent learning. That night, In-bom and Song-won search for a way to sneak out of school. During their attempt, they discover Gunde hiding inside a restroom. At first, they assume he is secretly smoking. Instead, they are shocked to find a knife hidden in his pocket. After breaking through a window, the two rush off to find Kwon-yuk and ask for his help. Not long afterward, they return to school with renewed confidence. They firmly believe that Kwon-yuk, now an official gang member and the strongest former student in the school's history, can defeat Hua Jin. Kwon-yuk's arrival is met with excitement and admiration from his followers. Hua Jin, however, remains completely calm. To him, Kwon Yuk is still just a kid. At first, Hua Jin dominates the fight with ease. Then Kwon Yuk suddenly manages to land a counterattack that knocks Hua Jin unconscious. The students erupt in celebration, convinced that their champion has finally won. The truth is very different. Hua Jin was only pretending to be unconscious. It is revealed that he intentionally baited Kwon Yuk into coming to the school. Once his trap is complete, Hua Jin gets back up and begins teaching Kwon Yuk a lesson. After repeatedly humiliating and overpowering him, he finally sends the young gangster crashing to the ground. Rather than being intimidated, Kwon Yuk remains confident. He believes his gang will soon arrive and make Hua Jin pay for what happened. A short time later, Hua Jin drags Kwon Yuk to the school gate, where an entire group of gang members is already waiting. Before the confrontation begins, Hua Jin issues a warning. If any of them step onto school grounds, he will not show mercy. Unlike the students, these men are adults. They are not minors and they are not protected by school rules. For the first time, Hua Jin has no reason to hold back. What follows is no longer a lesson for students, but a fight between grown men. Elsewhere, a lawmaker named Mr. Huang openly opposes the Bureau and criticizes Hua Jin's methods. His biggest concern is that Hua Jin is a former Special Forces captain with extensive combat experience. In Mr. Huang's eyes, allowing someone like him to use violence against students is dangerous and unacceptable. Because of that, Mr. Huang pushes for the Bureau to be shut down, arguing that it has given Hua Jin far too much freedom and authority. Mr. Choi, however, sees the situation differently. According to him, the violence taking place in schools has already gone far beyond ordinary student misconduct. Many of these teenagers behave more like gang members than students. Mr. Choi insists that the Bureau's mission is not to fight students, it is to confront monsters hiding behind student uniforms. And if monsters are the problem, then someone capable of dealing with monsters is required. Back at the school, Kwon Yuk's gang completely ignores Hua Jin's warning and launches a coordinated attack. Since these are adult criminals rather than students, Hua Jin no longer has any reason to hold back. What follows is a one-sided fight. The gang members rush him together, but Hua Jin tears through them without hesitation. One after another, they are beaten and brought down. Watching from a distance, the students are left speechless as Hua Jin defeats the entire group by himself without suffering a single injury. When the fight is over, Kwon Yuk is completely stunned. Meanwhile, In-bom and Songwon immediately drop to their knees and beg for forgiveness. Hua Jin tells them that they are apologizing to the wrong person. The two boys then turn to Hyung-ju and finally apologize to him. Overwhelmed with emotion, Hyung-ju breaks down in tears. All he ever wanted was a normal school life where he could study peacefully with his friends without constantly worrying about being bullied or hurt. Hua Jin then addresses all the students. He explains that what they do with their own lives is ultimately their choice. If they want to throw away their futures, that is up to them. But he will never allow them to destroy the future of someone else who genuinely wants to learn, graduate, and build a better life. Not long afterward, major changes begin taking place at the school. Students are forced to remove their tattoos. Smoking is banned, and motorcycles are no longer allowed on campus. For the first time in a long while, Hyung-ju and many other students are finally able to focus on their studies in peace. As for Kwon Yuk, he is arrested and sent to prison after his gang is linked to multiple criminal activities. The story then shifts into the past. Before the Bureau ever existed, Hua Jin was living a happy life with his fiancée, Ga-yoon, who worked as a teacher. Ga-yoon was deeply devoted to her profession. She genuinely believed that teaching was a noble calling and always tried to guide her students onto the right path. One of those students was Cuchul, a troubled boy who regularly bullied and extorted his classmates. Despite knowing his flaws, Ga-yoon never gave up on him. She continued supporting him and encouraging him to change. Tragically, her kindness was repaid in the worst possible way. One day, Cuchul stabbed her to death. The loss devastates Hua Jin. Consumed by grief and rage, he attempts to take revenge by killing Cuchul himself. Before he can go through with it, he is stopped by Mr. Choi, who is not only the Minister of Education, but also Ga-yoon's father. Mr. Choi refuses to let Hua Jin throw away his life and end up in prison. Instead, he shares an idea that has been growing in his mind. He wants to create a special organization dedicated to handling school bullying and protecting educators. After losing his daughter, he cannot bear the thought of other teachers suffering the same fate. Mr. Choi still believes there are many teachers who genuinely care about their students and dedicate their lives to guiding them. In his opinion, those teachers deserve protection. The story then moves to a new case involving a student named Yeri, a popular social media influencer. Yeri frequently breaks school rules by live streaming during class. One day, her teacher, Miss Jung, finally has enough and confiscates her phone. Not long afterward, Yeri uploads a video showing Miss Jung cutting the hair of a student named So Young, who happens to be Yeri's classmate. The video makes it look as though Miss Jung is an abusive teacher. In reality, she is simply helping So Young remove gum that had become stuck in her hair. Miss Jung plans to confront Yeri about the misleading video, but another teacher, Mr. Ko, steps in. As Yeri's homeroom teacher, he decides to handle the situation himself. Mr. Ko calls Yeri into the counseling room and patiently speaks with her. He has already discovered that Yeri and So Young intentionally edited the footage to damage Miss Jung's reputation as revenge for confiscating Yeri's phone. Unfortunately, Yeri refuses to admit anything. Instead, she uploads another video, this time making it appear as though Mr. Ko has sexually harassed her. The accusation spreads across social media almost instantly. Before long, Mr. Ko is facing intense public backlash. People demand punishment, and even online influencers join the attack, using the controversy to generate views and attention for their own content. The pressure becomes unbearable. Not only is Mr. Ko publicly shamed, but his family is also targeted by the media. Overwhelmed by the false accusations and believing he has become a burden to his loved ones, he eventually takes his own life. Miss Jung is devastated. Knowing that Mr. Ko would never harm a student, she demands that Yeri tell the truth. Instead of coming clean, Yeri portrays herself as the victim and records everything to gain even more sympathy from her followers. Within a short time, Miss Jung becomes the villain in Yeri's online narrative. The situation only worsens because the principal chooses to support Yeri, fearing damage to the school's reputation. As the controversy grows, the bureau finally steps in. A female inspector named Han Rim is assigned to investigate the case and deal with the students who have been abusing their teachers. When Han Rim arrives at the school, the students barely acknowledge her presence. Everyone continues doing whatever they want. Yeri even starts another livestream and openly mocks Han Rim, treating her like a joke. Han Rim orders Yeri to hand over her phone since class is about to begin. Yeri completely ignores her and acts as though the rules do not apply to her. Han Rim responds immediately. She kicks the phone away and re-establishes the authority of the teacher in the classroom. She makes it clear that school rules will be enforced and orders every student to surrender their phones. While Han Rim deals with the rebellious students by disciplining them on the field, Hua Jin heads to the teacher's office to gather testimony. He learns that Mr. Ko was not the only victim. Several teachers have been targeted by students who spread personal information online and organized harassment campaigns to ruin their reputations. Hua Jin emphasizes that the Bureau will take full responsibility throughout the investigation. He encourages the teachers to speak honestly and assures them that they no longer need to suffer in silence. It is also revealed that Han Rim once served under Hua Jin in the Special Forces. Like him, she has an impressive military background. The difference is that Han Rim has a notoriously short temper. Because of that, Hua Jin repeatedly reminds her to stay patient, especially when dealing with situations that make her want to hurt someone. After school, the students prepare to leave for the day and deliberately abandon Miss Jung to clean the classroom by herself. Han Rim immediately stops them. She firmly reminds the students that classroom cleaning is their responsibility, not their teachers, and orders them to carry out their assigned duties properly. The next day, Han Rim walks into the classroom carrying a collection of evidence. She reveals that several students have been secretly collecting personal information about their teachers, taking photos without permission, and editing those images to mock and humiliate them online. According to Han Rim, these actions are not harmless pranks. They are serious offenses that can be prosecuted because they involve spreading false information with malicious intent. She once again makes it clear that the Bureau will take a firm stance against every form of bullying in schools, including cyber harassment and defamation targeting teachers. Instead of being intimidated, So Young argues that the Bureau has also crossed a line by secretly investigating students' social media accounts. Han Rim remains unfazed. She explains that the Bureau has broad authority while conducting investigations, then proceeds to punish the students involved in the campaign against their teachers. Meanwhile, the students begin wondering who reported them in the first place. Some suspect that Miss Jung contacted the Bureau herself. Others believe the investigation is connected to the case involving Mr. Ko and Yeri. The following day, Yeri suddenly visits the teacher's office and begins acting unusually friendly toward Miss Jung. Even more surprising, the rest of the class also appears to have changed. The students become more respectful, focus on their studies, and stop openly mocking their teacher. Miss Jung starts to believe that they may have genuinely turned over a new leaf. Han Rem is far less convinced. She warns Miss Jung not to lower her guard, especially around Yeri, who has a history of manipulating people to get what she wants. As it turns out, Han Rim's suspicions are correct. Yeri's sudden kindness is nothing more than an act. Her real goal is to gather information about Hanrim and the Bureau through Miss Jung. She claims that the students are suffering because of the Bureau's presence and tries to persuade Miss Jung to help remove them from the school. The next day, Hua Jin visits Miss Jung to hear her side of the story directly. Miss Jung admits that ever since Yeri uploaded the video attacking her reputation, she has been living in fear. The constant emotional pressure and harassment have taken a heavy toll on her. At that moment, Hua Jin shares the story of Gayun, the teacher who was stabbed to death by one of her own students. That tragedy is exactly why the Bureau was created. Hua Jin explains that he and the Bureau are determined to protect teachers who are being abused and intimidated so that no one else suffers the same fate as Gayun. He then reveals something that completely surprises Miss Jung. The people who contacted the Bureau were not the teachers and not the principal. The report actually came from students in her own class, including a girl named Su Jin. After everything that happened to Mr. Ko, Su Jin and her friends became deeply worried about Miss Jung. They describe her as a caring and dedicated teacher who has always done her best for her students. According to them, Miss Jung genuinely cares about their future and has guided them with patience and kindness. The reason they joined in mocking her was not because they hated her. They were simply afraid of Yeri. Unable to speak out openly, they kept their feelings hidden and secretly asked the Bureau for help. Their actions directly contradict Yeri's claim that all the students were uncomfortable with the investigation. Hearing this leaves Miss Jung overwhelmed with emotion. She breaks down in tears after realizing that there are still students who support her and simply want to learn in peace. Inspired by their faith in her, Miss Jung decides to stop living in fear. She resolves to become stronger and do her best for the students who genuinely care about their education. As a result, when Yeri later asks to livestream with her, Miss Jung firmly refuses. She also refuses to tolerate classroom disruptions any longer. When Yeri refuses to solve a math problem in front of the class, Miss Jung immediately steps in and disciplines her. For the first time, she openly reasserts her authority as a teacher. Miss Jung makes it clear that guiding students onto the right path is part of her responsibility, and from now on, she intends to fulfill that responsibility without hesitation. Watching this transformation, Hanrim can barely hide her excitement. She is genuinely pleased to see Miss Jung reclaiming the authority and confidence that every teacher deserves. That night, an enraged Yeri decides to get revenge by humiliating Miss Jung on social media once again. To her shock, she discovers that she can no longer access any of her accounts. Goon has hacked them, deleted all of her videos, and uploaded evidence proving that she lied about Mr. Ko sexually harassing her. The video spreads across the internet almost immediately. Public opinion turns against Yeri overnight. Online users condemn her actions, and many begin blaming her for Mr. Ko's death. Furious, Yeri storms off to confront Miss Jung and holds her responsible for everything that has happened. During the confrontation, Yeri reveals that Miss Jung had always been her real target. According to her, Mr. Ko only became involved because he tried to protect Miss Jung, and that intervention ultimately led to his death. Consumed by anger, Yeri even attempts to kill Miss Jung. However, during the struggle, Yeri nearly falls from a balcony. Despite everything that has happened, Miss Jung instinctively reaches out and saves her. Instead of appreciating the help, Yeri shoves Miss Jung off the balcony. Fortunately, Hua Jin arrives just in time and manages to catch her. Although he succeeds in saving Miss Jung, both of them end up falling in the process. Elsewhere, Hanrim comes face to face with Yeri. At this point, Hanrim is barely controlling her rage. Every instinct is telling her to end the situation once and for all. She gives Yeri one final chance to surrender, but Yeri responds by attacking her with a knife. Hanrim catches the blade with her bare hand and forces Yeri toward the balcony. For the first time, Yeri experiences the same terror she has inflicted on others as she faces the possibility of falling to her death. In the end, Hanrim chooses not to kill her. She decides that living with the consequences of her actions will be a far harsher punishment than death. Meanwhile, Goon panics as blood continues pouring from Hanrim's injured hand. Things become even more worrying when Hua Jin remains motionless after the fall. Fortunately, it turns out that Hua Jin is only pretending to be unconscious. Compared to what he endured during his military career, this fall is nothing unusual. Miss Jung is relieved to see that he is unharmed, although she cannot help scolding him for risking his life to save her. For Hua Jin, however, the situation is simple. He made a promise to protect her, and he kept that promise. The following day, Mr. Huang holds a press conference and publicly attacks the Bureau. He reveals the story behind its creation, claiming that the organization was founded out of personal revenge rather than justice. According to Mr. Huang, the teacher who was murdered by her own student was none other than Mr. Choi's daughter and Hua Jin's fiancée. He argues that this personal connection proves the Bureau exists because of the private grudges held by Mr. Choi and Hua Jin, and he uses that argument to push for its dissolution. Despite facing criticism from all sides, Mr. Choi refuses to back down. Instead, he immediately assigns Hua Jin and the team to investigate a new case involving a student named Hyun, who recently attacked a teacher. Upon arriving at the school, Hua Jin meets the alleged victim, a teacher named Sang Yol. Rather than treating him like a suspect, Hua Jin acts surprisingly friendly toward him, which immediately raises Han Rim's suspicions. Sang Yol asks Hua Jin to let the matter go, explaining that important exams are approaching and that he wants Hyun to be allowed to participate. At first glance, Sang Yol appears to be an exceptional educator. He enjoys the support of both students and teachers, and the school has become one of the most prestigious institutions in the region since he began working there. Even so, Hua Jin quietly keeps a close eye on him. He follows Sang Yol throughout the school and secretly gathers information, including observing a room where the upcoming exam papers are being stored. Meanwhile, Han Rim interrogates Hyun. At first, Hyun refuses to say anything. Han Rim cannot understand why a student who has spent years maintaining the top rank in his class would suddenly risk everything by attacking a teacher. Eventually, after enough pressure, Hyun finally opens up. He explains that he comes from an ordinary family. His parents run a small restaurant on the outskirts of the city and have spent years working hard to support his education. According to Hyun, his parents spent years working tirelessly to give him every opportunity they could. Then Sang Yol entered their lives and everything started falling apart. Not long after Sang Yol visited their family restaurant, the business was suddenly shut down over alleged building violations. The closure devastated the family's finances, forcing Hyun to quit the private academy that had helped him maintain his academic performance. His parents then hired a private tutor to help him continue studying, but that arrangement did not last long. After Hyun mentioned the tutor to Sang Yol, the tutor unexpectedly resigned without explanation. As Han Rim listens to the story, she becomes increasingly frustrated with Hua Jin. From her perspective, he seems far too friendly towards Sang Yol and appears unwilling to investigate what Sang Yol may have done to Hyun and his family. Hua Jin, however, simply tells her to focus on her own responsibilities and stop worrying about matters that do not concern her. Meanwhile, Goon Dae uncovers a possible connection between Sang Yol and a private academy known as Novice. Determined to learn more, he secretly visits the academy to investigate. Unfortunately, one of the instructors quickly becomes suspicious of him. Goon Dae claims to be one of Sang Yol's students, but the instructor immediately senses that he is lying and begins questioning him. Just as the situation is about to become a problem, Hyungju unexpectedly appears and greets Goon Dae, unintentionally confirming his cover story as a student. Later, the two share dinner together. During the meal, Hyungju explains that life at school has improved significantly. The hierarchy and occasional fights still exist, but the constant bullying is gone. For the first time in a long while, he feels safe. He even reveals that Inbom and Songwon have become close friends and are getting along surprisingly well. Hearing this, Gundi cannot help but smile. Seeing how much things have changed reminds him that the Bureau's efforts are making a real difference. The story then briefly shifts to Hanrim's past. Back in high school, she was frequently targeted by bullies because she stood up for weaker students who were being abused. Even after she was badly injured, the bullies continued beating her without mercy. That was when Hua Jin suddenly appeared and put an end to it. Watching him stand against injustice without fear left a lasting impression on her.
치게.
From that day forward, Hanrim decided that she wanted to become someone like Hua Jin. Back in the present, Hua Jin begins digging deeper into Sang Yol's connection with Novice Academy. He discovers that the academy operates exclusive programs designed for students from wealthy and influential families. At the same time, he starts asking questions about a student named Sujong. If Hyun is expelled or prevented from taking his exams because of the assault case, Sujong stands to benefit more than anyone else. Another detail quickly catches Hua Jin's attention. Sujong attended the same middle school as Yeri, and Sang Yol had been one of their teachers there as well. It turns out that Yeri had already provided Hua Jin with information about Sang Yol's past actions. According to her, Sang Yol sabotaged her education in a similar way and ultimately prevented her from taking an important final examination. The pattern becomes clear. Sang Yol has been deliberately removing talented students who threaten the success of wealthy and privileged children. Hyun is simply the latest victim. To achieve this, Sang Yol overloaded Hyun with special classes designed to exhaust him, pressured his private tutor into quitting, interfered with his family's business, and manipulated situations to push Hyun toward violence. His goal was simple: break Hyun mentally so that he would be unable to take the exam. Even after Hua Jin uncovers the truth, Sang Yol remains calm. He believes his powerful connections will protect him, and that neither Hua Jin nor the Bureau can touch him. Elsewhere, Han Rim vents her frustration at Gundae. Eventually, Gundae reveals the truth. Hua Jin has suspected Sang Yol from the very beginning. His friendly behavior was never genuine. It was simply a tactic to gain Sang Yol's trust and gather evidence without raising suspicion. The moment Han Rim realizes this, she immediately feels guilty. Understanding that she misjudged Hua Jin, she sincerely apologizes for doubting him. At that very moment, the situation suddenly takes a dramatic turn. Police officers arrive and arrest both Hua Jin and Han Rim for the violence they used while carrying out their duties. Mr. Choi is also taken into custody on accusations that he abused his authority as Minister of Education for personal reasons. It quickly becomes clear that the entire operation was orchestrated by Sang Yol. With powerful connections throughout the government and support from influential families like Sujong's, Sang Yol has managed to strike back against the Bureau. Confident that the Bureau will no longer interfere, Sang Yol secretly provides Sujong's mother with the exam answers, ensuring that Sujong will achieve top scores. In return, he requests financial backing for his campaign to become the next superintendent of education in Seoul. For Sujong's wealthy family, money is no obstacle, so they immediately agree. Meanwhile, at the police station, Mr. Choi tells Gundae that he plans to approve the transfer request Gundae submitted some time ago. He instructs him to retrieve the necessary paperwork so that he can officially sign it. More importantly, he wants Gundae separated from the Bureau's operations and protected from the legal trouble surrounding the investigation. Unlike the others, Gundae is viewed as an ordinary civil servant who was simply following orders. Eventually, exam day arrives. Despite the assault case, Hyun is still allowed to take the test because his punishment has been temporarily suspended. Everything appears to be going according to Sang Yol's plan. Then disaster strikes. As Sang Yol begins checking the exam papers, he is stunned to discover that every answer on Sujong's test is wrong. Panicked, he rushes back to the classroom and attempts to stop the examination without providing any explanation. When he examines the test papers more closely, he realizes what happened. The exam questions have been changed. At that exact moment, Hua Jin appears and reveals the truth. The Bureau secretly replaced the exam papers without Sang Yol's knowledge. It turns out that Mr. Choi and Hua Jin had already anticipated Sang Yol's actions. Before his arrest, Mr. Choi had quietly instructed Gundae to switch the tests as part of a plan to expose Sang Yol's corruption. Hua Jin then presents video evidence showing that Sang Yol provided Sujong with the answers in advance. He also explains that the Bureau did not alter the actual content of the exam. They only rearranged the order of the questions. Any student who truly understood the material would still have been able to complete the test normally. Sujong failed because she relied entirely on the answer key instead of solving the questions herself. To make matters worse, Hua Jin plays a recorded conversation between Sang Yol and Sujong's mother. The recording leaves no doubt that Sang Yol leaked the exam answers in exchange for support and personal gain. The revelation shocks everyone. The students are furious and disappointed. They spent countless hours studying honestly, only to discover that their own teacher had been manipulating the system behind their backs. The teachers are equally devastated. For years, they viewed Sang Yol as an exemplary educator and a role model. Learning the truth completely shatters that image. At the same time, Mr. Choi is attending a public hearing broadcast to the media. Many officials accuse him of creating the Bureau through an abuse of power. Despite the criticism, Mr. Choi remains calm. Rather than defending himself, he presents the Bureau's investigation results. He exposes the conspiracy between Sang Yol, several wealthy parents, and Noavis Academy to manipulate student rankings and examination results. He even publicly reveals the names of the parents involved. Among them is Mr. Lee, a lawmaker who had been one of the Bureau's loudest critics alongside Mr. Huang. Ironically, Mr. Lee also happens to be Sujong's father. Mr. Choi then clarifies the Bureau's true purpose. According to him, the organization does not exist to protect teachers or students specifically. It exists to protect victims, anyone suffering intimidation, abuse, or exploitation, whether physical or emotional. He openly acknowledges that personal pain played a role in the Bureau's creation. However, he insists that his goal was never revenge. His goal was to ensure that no teacher or student would ever have to lose their life in the same tragic way that his daughter did. With the truth finally exposed, Hyun expresses his gratitude to Hua Jin and the Bureau for uncovering Sang Yol's corruption. In the end, the parents and educators who collaborated with Sang Yol are arrested. As for Sang Yol himself, The once respected teacher is sent to prison, bringing his scheme to a complete and public downfall. The story then shifts to a new case involving an elementary school teacher named Jason. At her lowest point, Jason contemplates taking her own life. Concerned about her condition, Han Rim arranges for her to undergo a specialized psychological evaluation designed for elementary school teachers. The results are alarming. Jason is diagnosed with severe depression and is immediately advised to take a leave of absence while receiving intensive treatment. It turns out that Jason's mother was the one who contacted the bureau. After reading her daughter's diary, she became terrified that Jason might actually go through with her suicidal thoughts. While Jason is away recovering, Hua Jin is assigned to temporarily take over her class and investigate what caused her condition to deteriorate so severely. At first, Hua Jin struggles to keep up with the energetic first graders. The children are constantly moving, talking, and demanding attention. As he spends more time with them, however, he begins to understand just how much patience and dedication teachers like Jason need every single day. Before everything fell apart, Jason was a cheerful and kind-hearted young woman. Becoming a teacher had always been her dream, and she was genuinely happy when she finally achieved it. For a while, everything went well. Then a parent named Ji Young began making her life miserable. Ji Young constantly criticized Jason's every action, always claiming that she was acting in the best interests of her son, Hua Jin. No matter what Jason did, it was never good enough. Ji Young bombarded her with messages at all hours of the day and night. Many of the complaints involved trivial matters that should have been handled by parents at home rather than teachers at school. Over time, the situation became increasingly intrusive. Ji Young even began monitoring Jason's social media accounts and criticizing the way she dressed in her private life. Frustrated and exhausted, Jason reported the harassment to the principal. Unfortunately, the principal explained that the school had very limited authority when it came to disciplining parents. In fact, she had previously been reported by the parent committee simply for supporting a teacher during a dispute. Despite everything, Jason never allowed her feelings toward Ji Young to affect her treatment of Hua Jin. She continued caring for him with the same kindness she showed every student. In fact, she even created a special place in the classroom called the Heart Room, a safe space where students could relax, express themselves, and feel comfortable. The change in Hua Jin was remarkable. A child who had once been quiet and withdrawn gradually opened up. He started smiling more, interacting with his classmates, and enjoying school life. For a time, it seemed like things were finally improving. Then another incident changed everything. One day, Hua Jin became involved in a fight with one of his classmates and ended up injuring the other child. Following school procedures, Jason contacted both families. Instead of resolving the matter calmly, the two mothers immediately began arguing. Ji Young quickly turned her anger toward Jason and accused her of failing to protect her son. From that point on, the harassment intensified. Ji Young relentlessly pressured Jason to support Hua Jin during the school's violence committee hearing. Jason refused. As far as she was concerned, the facts were clear. Hua Jin had been the one who injured his classmate. She tried explaining that the situation did not need to become so complicated. All Hua Jin really needed to do was write an apology letter. The injured child's family was not demanding punishment and viewed the incident as a simple conflict between children that could be resolved peacefully, but Ji Young refused to let it go. Despite the fact that Hua Jin had started the fight, she continued pushing for a formal violence committee hearing, turning a manageable situation into a much larger conflict. Because Jason refused to take Hua Jin's side, Ji Young immediately complained to her husband, who soon arrived at the school to intimidate her. That was only the beginning. Ji Young also filed a report accusing Jason of child abuse, confidently claiming that she could simply apologize later if the accusation turned out to be false. At the same time, she spread rumors throughout parent forums, accusing Jason of mistreating students. The rumors spread quickly, and before long, the school found itself under intense pressure from parents demanding that Jason be fired. After learning everything Jason had endured, Hua Jin and the bureau decided it was time to step in. Their goal was not only to help Jason, but also to confront parents who abused their influence to harass teachers who had dedicated themselves to educating children. Soon afterward, Ji Young met Hua Jin, who was posing as Hua Jin's new homeroom teacher. Just like she had done with Jason, Ji Young immediately began demanding that he follow all of her instructions, insisting that everything she did was for her son's benefit. Hua Jin decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. He constantly called her throughout the day, asking endless questions about Hua Jin and seeking approval for every little detail. Before long, Ji Young became completely fed up and marched to the school to confront him. Hua Jin did not stop there. He even visited Woo Jin's father at the bank where he worked and deliberately embarrassed him in front of his co-workers.
정말 제가 잘못했습니다. 한 번만 용서해 주십시오.
아버님! 아버님! 혹시 제가 제 밥줄만은 끊지 말아주세요, 아버님!
That evening, Ji-young's husband exploded in anger after learning what had happened. With a promotion approaching, the public humiliation was the last thing he wanted. The following day, Ji-young went straight to the principal and demanded that Hua Jin be fired. This time, however, things were different. Rather than giving in, the principal firmly instructed Ji-young to follow proper complaint procedures and respect the legal boundaries that applied to everyone. Realizing that the school was no longer willing to side with her, Ji-young decided to transfer Woo Jin to another school. She also organized a meeting with other parents in hopes of gathering support. Unfortunately for her, Hua Jin had already anticipated the move. He had met with the parents beforehand and even filed a report accusing Ji-young of child abuse after she forcefully dragged Woo Jin out of the classroom. Ji-young immediately denied the accusation. Hua Jin calmly replied that he could always apologize later if the accusation proved to be false. It was the exact same excuse Ji-young had used when threatening Ji-sun months earlier. Enraged, Ji-young eventually attempts to harm Ji-sun by hitting her with a car, but the plan fails. Later, she follows Ji-sun after the teacher receives a phone call from Ji-young's number and rushes to the school. When Ji-young arrives, Hua Jin is already waiting for her. At that moment, he finally reveals his true identity as a bureau inspector. He proceeds to list every violation Ji-young has committed and explains that many of her actions carry serious legal consequences. Meanwhile, Ji-sun discovers that the person who called her was actually Woo Jin, using his mother's phone. The boy is heartbroken. He apologizes to Ji-sun for everything his mother has done to her. As they talk, the truth about Woo Jin's feelings finally comes to light. He genuinely believes that his mother dislikes him because she constantly scolds him and rarely shows him any warmth or affection. As a result, he grew into a quiet, insecure child who struggled with confidence. Everything began to change when Ji-sun entered his life. She treated him with kindness, patience, and genuine care. Little by little, Woo Jin opened up. He started interacting with other children, making friends, and finding joy in school. More importantly, Ji-sun made sure he could enjoy learning and playing without constantly feeling afraid or inadequate. Watching her son interact with Ji-sun finally forces Ji-young to confront the truth. For years, she had completely misunderstood the teacher. She sees how comfortable Woo Jin is around Ji-sun and notices something she rarely sees at home. He is laughing freely. For once, he looks happy, relaxed, and unafraid of being judged or scolded. At last, Ji-young realizes how much damage her own actions have caused. In the end, she is brought to trial for the harassment and abuse she directed toward Ji-sun. As for Ji-sun, she successfully recovers and returns to the classroom. The moment she walks back into Woo Jin's class, the students greet her with excitement and happiness, proving just how much she means to them. Sometime later, Hua Jin and the rest of the team are driving through the city when they catch a group of middle school students attempting to steal a car. Hua Jin and Han Rim immediately jump into action. The teenagers manage to steal the vehicle and deliberately provoke Hua Jin into chasing them. A dangerous pursuit follows through the streets until Han Rim finally brings it to an end by throwing a bicycle beneath the stolen car, forcing it to stop. The students are taken into police custody, but the situation quickly becomes frustrating. Because they are minors, they are released almost immediately. To make matters worse, the same students file complaints against Hua Jin and Han Rim, accusing them of using violence against children. As a result, Mr. Choi is forced to come to the police station and personally secure their release. It is soon revealed that the teenagers attend Hyunjin Middle School, a school that has been struggling with constant disciplinary problems. The students openly disrespect teachers and adults, vandalize property, and create chaos wherever they go. Most importantly, they fear no consequences because they know their age often protects them from serious punishment. The following day, Hua Jin officially arrives at Hyunjin Middle School to begin an investigation. The students who reported him to the police are led by a notorious troublemaker named Ji Wong and his group of friends. They are well known for bullying other students, yet nobody is willing to testify against them. The fear they have created throughout the school runs that deep. Meanwhile, Han Rim and Gundae search for a girl named Yoon Jin, the same student who had been forced to drink alcohol during the previous incident. According to the attendance records, she came to school that day, but nobody can find her. Eventually, Han Rim realizes something is wrong and discovers Yoon Jin locked inside a locker. She quickly rescues her, The girl is in terrible condition, but she initially refuses to admit that Ji Won has been abusing her. As Han Rim examines the situation, she notices something unusual. Despite reports that Yun Jin had been drinking, there is no smell of alcohol on her breath. Instead, Han Rim finds suspicious pills hidden inside her bag. Yun Jin claims they are simply supplements. However, when Han Rim pretends she is about to take one herself, Yun Jin immediately panics and tries to stop her. That reaction tells Han Rim everything she needs to know. The pills are drugs. Yun Jin then reveals the truth. She used to be a cheerful and energetic girl, but she became obsessed with losing weight. One day, Ji Won approached her and offered what he claimed was a powerful diet pill commonly used by K-pop idols. Trusting him, she took the pills. Before long, she became addicted. Soon, she was paying 50,000 won for each dose and eventually began working for Ji Won as a drug distributor just to feed her addiction. Unable to endure his abuse any longer, Yun Jin secretly reported Ji Won and his friends to the police. Unfortunately, because they were minors, they were released without serious consequences. When Ji Won discovered that Yun Jin had reported him, he brutally beat her and locked her inside a locker for hours. As she tells her story, Yun Jin is completely hopeless. She believes the Bureau is no different from every other authority that has failed to stop students like Ji Won. In her eyes, nobody can punish minors who think they are above the law. Han Rim firmly disagrees. She assures Yun Jin that the Bureau will act against any violation committed inside a school, regardless of the offender's age. Furious after hearing everything, Han Rim reports the details to Hua Jin. Even then, Ji Won remains arrogant. He openly mocks Hua Jin and Han Rim, convinced that his age makes him untouchable. This time, however, things are different. Ji Won and his friends are arrested and transferred to a juvenile detention center. The facility's warden is hesitant about signing a cooperation agreement with the Bureau, unsure whether the program will work. Mr. Choi personally reassures him that the Bureau will take full responsibility for the results. As they are escorted to their cells, Ji Won immediately begins protesting. He threatens to report Hua Jin and Han Rim for using violence against minors, convinced that he can still manipulate the system in his favor. Hua Jin could not care less. Instead, he allows Han Rim to give the boys a harsh lesson, making it clear that their usual tricks will not work here. Before long, Ji Won and his friends begin adjusting to life inside the juvenile detention center. Despite being inmates, they are still required to attend classes, with Goon serving as their teacher. Whenever they refuse to complete their assignments or slack off, Han Rim punishes them by forcing them to run laps around the yard. The discipline does not stop there. Hua Jin deliberately places them in situations where they experience the same fear, pressure, and intimidation that they once inflicted on their own victims. Inside the detention center, they are treated like inmates, not untouchable teenagers hiding behind their age. After lunch one day, Ji Won and his friends are assigned to wash dishes. During the task, Ji Won gets into a fight with another inmate named Kim. When Hua Jin and the guards rush over to break it up, something unexpected happens. Kim claims that there was no fight at all and says that Ji Won was actually helping him after he accidentally fell. As the inmates return to their cells, Hua Jin quietly warns Ji Won not to provoke Kim. The warning carries serious weight. Kim is serving time for brutally murdering the people who had bullied him. The next day, Ji Won and his friends begin taking their duties more seriously, especially because Kim seems to be watching them closely. Later, Ji Won notices Kim secretly stealing a spoon. Knowing that a spoon can be sharpened into a weapon or used for self-harm, he reports it to the guards during a routine inspection. However, when the guards search Kim, they find nothing but a tube of toothpaste. Then everything changes in an instant. Kim suddenly reveals the spoon, which he has sharpened into a makeshift weapon, and charges directly at Ji Won. Kim openly declares that he is already serving a life sentence, so killing one more person would make little difference to him. He also promises to make every day of Ji Won's life inside the facility feel like hell. Meanwhile, outside the detention center, the parents of the students launch a campaign demanding their children's release. They threaten to use every political and legal tool available to remove Mr. Choi from office, arguing that minors should never be in prison. Mr. Choi refuses to back down. He remains firm in his belief that the Bureau's responsibility is to protect victims above all else. Soon afterward, Hua Jin presents the evidence of Ji Won and his friends' crimes directly to their parents. Even then, Ji Won shows no remorse. Instead, he immediately portrays himself as the victim in front of his mother and refuses to accept responsibility for anything he has done. His true nature is exposed shortly afterward. When Yunjin declares that she will never forgive him, Ji-won openly attempts to attack and kill her. That final act removes any remaining doubt.
이제부터 여기가 지옥이고.
나도 졸업하고 싶다고.
안다고 씨발년아!
The authorities officially classify Ji-won and his friends as criminal offenders. From that point forward, they are no longer treated as misguided children. They are sentenced to serve their punishment in juvenile detention. After escorting Ji-won and his friends back to their cells, Hua Jin pays a visit to Kim. It is then revealed that the two already know each other. In fact, Kim intentionally confronted Ji-won as part of a plan arranged by Hua Jin to teach the boy a lesson. Although Kim was convicted of murder, he has spent years reflecting on his actions and sincerely regrets what he did. More than anything, he hopes no other child will be driven down the same path by bullying. At that moment, another inmate suddenly approaches Ji-won with the intention of killing him. Before the attack can succeed, a different prisoner rushes in and protects Ji-won, taking the injury himself. When Hua Jin learns who the injured inmate is, he is completely stunned. The man is Cuchul, the very person who murdered his fiancée, Ga-yun. After discovering that Hua Jin was Ga-yun's fiancée, Cuchul falls to his knees and apologizes. He claims to regret his actions and promises to spend the rest of his life reflecting on his sins. Cuchul appears overwhelmed with guilt. Hua Jin, however, shows no reaction and simply walks away. The moment Hua Jin is gone, Cuchul stands up and reveals his true nature. The remorse was all an act. His expression immediately turns cold, suggesting that he has not changed nearly as much as he pretends. Sometime later, Hua Jin and the team receive an unexpected visitor. A man named Mr. Lee arrives at their office begging for help to find his son, Jae-yun. According to Mr. Lee, Jae-yun has become addicted to online gambling and accumulated debts totaling 80 million won. At first, Mr. Lee paid off the debt and forgave his son on the condition that he would never gamble again. Unfortunately, the addiction had already taken hold. Jae-yun soon returned to gambling and accumulated even more debt. His father even replaced his smartphone with a device that had no internet access, hoping to cut him off from gambling sites. But someone secretly gave Jae-yun another phone, allowing him to continue. The situation spiraled out of control. Jae-yun's debts continued to grow, and eventually debt collectors showed up at Mr. Lee's workplace. The confrontation became so severe that Mr. Lee was publicly assaulted in front of his co-workers and ultimately lost his job. After that, the entire family fell into financial hardship. His wife was forced to work tirelessly just to keep up with the mounting debts caused by her son's addiction. Then things became even worse. Jae-chun suddenly disappeared from home, and his family has had no idea where he is ever since. After hearing the story, the Bureau agrees to investigate. Goon-dae is assigned to go undercover as a student at Nakwon High School, where Jae-yun attended classes. Once he arrives, he is placed in the same class as Jae-yun and quickly discovers something alarming. A large portion of the student body is addicted to online gambling. He also learns that many students have run away from home, just like Jae-yun, because their gambling debts became impossible to repay. In class, Goon-dae befriends a student named Songbin. Songbin insists that the application everyone uses is not gambling at all. According to him, it is simply an online game where players can earn money. To prove it, he shows Goon-dae how the system works. At first, everything seems harmless. Goon-dae receives 50,000 won just for registering as a new player. The easy money immediately catches his attention. Soon he starts playing more often. At first he wins repeatedly, which only encourages him to continue. Then the losses begin. Within a short period of time, he loses a significant amount of money and becomes increasingly desperate to recover it. Sensing an opportunity, Songbin approaches him with a solution. Through one of his contacts, he offers Goon-dae a loan worth 1 million won. The only requirement is that Goon-dae provide his parents' phone number as collateral. Desperate to keep playing, Goon-dae agrees. But the loan is nothing more than a trap. He continues gambling, continues losing, and sinks deeper into debt. Before long, the interest rates become absurd, turning what seemed like a simple game into a nightmare that is almost impossible to escape. Goon-dae becomes increasingly desperate as his losses continue to pile up. Things get even worse when Han Rim suddenly receives a phone call from a debt collector demanding payment for Goon-dae's debts. To her shock, Goon-dae had listed her phone number as collateral when taking out the loan. While Han Rim is furious, Hua Jin remains surprisingly calm. It turns out this was part of his plan all along. He intends to expose the entire online gambling syndicate, and Goon-dae is serving as bait to lure them out. The next day, Han Rim goes to the school to keep a close eye on Goon-dae. Unfortunately, she lets her guard down for only a moment. That brief lapse is all the criminals need. Right outside the school, Goon-dae is kidnapped by debt collectors working for the gambling syndicate. Han Rim immediately panics and contacts Hua Jin. Meanwhile, Goon-dae quickly realizes that he is not the only victim. Many other students have fallen into the same trap. Before being taken away, he manages to leave a clue by secretly tossing his phone onto the roadside. Eventually, Goon-dae is transported to an abandoned building and forced to work for the criminals. There, he discovers the truth. The debt collectors are part of a large online gambling organization that targets students through seemingly harmless gaming and reading applications. Students who accumulate debts are kidnapped and forced to work until their debts and outrageous interest payments are repaid. Goon-dae is assigned to a room where his job is to send text messages containing gambling links to every phone number on a massive contact list. He considers sending a hidden message to his friends, but another boy suddenly stops him. The boy warns him about the surveillance cameras covering every corner of the room. Goon-dae immediately recognizes him. The boy is Jae-yoon. It turns out Jae-yoon never ran away from home. He was kidnapped by the syndicate just like everyone else. Because the cameras capture their interaction, Jae-yoon is brutally beaten by the gang members.
야, 씨발 새끼가 씨발 아픈 티내지 마.
The following day, the criminals complain about problems with their servers. Their boss is furious because technical issues are preventing overseas users from accessing the gambling website. Already irritated, the gang members take out their frustration on Jae-yoon after catching him asleep. Seeing how badly Jae-yoon's condition is deteriorating, Goon-dae steps forward and offers to fix the server problems himself. The criminals bring him directly to their boss, a man named Jisoo. At gunpoint, Goon-dae is ordered to solve the issue immediately. Fortunately, he manages to repair the system in a short amount of time. Impressed by his skills, Jisoo rewards him with a proper meal. Meanwhile, Jae-yoon and the other students receive nothing more than a piece of bread and a carton of milk. During lunch, Jae-yoon suddenly collapses unconscious. Jisoo casually orders his men to remove him from the room, as though he is nothing more than a disposable tool. Elsewhere, Han Rim drags Songbin to the bureau and forces him to reveal everything he knows. Songbin admits that the syndicate recruited him to persuade his classmates to download and play the gambling app. However, he insists that he does not know where the organization's headquarters is located. At the same time, Hua Jin and Han Rim notice something unusual. The flashing advertisements on the gambling platform contain a hidden message. Goon-dae has embedded a clue using Morse code. Following the signal, they successfully trace the location of the syndicate. When they arrive, however, the building appears completely empty. A closer look reveals the truth. The location Goon-dae provided is actually across from the real headquarters, which is hidden inside another abandoned building nearby. Without wasting a second, Hua Jin and Han Rim rush toward the actual hideout. They force their way inside and immediately begin taking down the guards. Han Rim is desperate to find Goon-dae as quickly as possible. Hua Jin, on the other hand, is slightly concerned that Han Rim might end up killing every criminal in the building before they even locate him. The gang members never stand a chance. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Hua Jin and Han Rim overpower them one after another. A fierce battle erupts throughout the building, but the outcome is never really in doubt. Soon, every guard has been defeated. Not long afterward, Goon-dae finally appears and quickly explains the situation. When Hua Jin learns that numerous students are being held captive and forced to work for the gambling operation, he immediately gives new orders. Han Rim and Goon-dae are to rescue the students. As for Hua Jin, he heads upstairs alone. There is only one person left to deal with, the boss of the entire operation. Another fierce battle soon breaks out as Hua Jin fights his way through Jisoo's remaining men. Just like before, the outcome is never really in doubt. One after another, the gang members are overwhelmed and taken down. Realizing the situation is hopeless, Jisoo abandons his subordinates and escapes through the rooftop. Hua Jin immediately gives chase. After a brief pursuit, he catches up to Jisoo and finally puts an end to his attempt to run. Hua Jin then delivers a harsh lesson to the man responsible for the entire operation. Jisoo had lured innocent students into online gambling, illegally drained money from their families, kidnapped vulnerable teenagers, and forced them to work under inhumane conditions. Meanwhile, Han Rim and Goon-dae continue searching the building. Fortunately, they manage to find Jae-yoon alive. His condition is extremely weak, but he survives. Not long afterward, the police arrive and arrest Jisoo along with the rest of his organization. Jae-yoon is rushed to the hospital for treatment, while the operation that had trapped countless students finally comes to an end. During the aftermath, Han Rim apologizes to Goon-dae for failing to protect him from being kidnapped. Goon-dae, however, does not make a big deal out of it and simply moves on. A few days later, Mr. Lee returns to the bureau to personally thank everyone for saving his son. At the same time, Songbin finally confesses the truth to Jae-yoon. He admits that he was the one who lured Jae-yoon and many of their classmates into the gambling app and helped connect them to Jisoo's operation. Jae-yoon is furious. More than anything, he feels betrayed because Songbin was his closest friend. Songbin tries to defend himself by explaining that he was also being threatened by Jisoo and felt he had no choice but to follow orders. Hua Jin listens to both sides before making something very clear. Regardless of the circumstances, both Jae-yoon and Songbin must face the consequences of their actions. They could be suspended or expelled from school. Outside of school, they might face jail time or be sentenced to community service. Neither boy likes hearing that. They immediately protest, insisting that they were victims who had been manipulated by adults seeking profit. Hua Jin disagrees. According to him, the true victims are their parents. Their parents are the ones who lost their savings, their homes, and the money they spent years earning to secure their children's futures. Many parents worked themselves to exhaustion trying to support their families. Some paid off enormous gambling debts without expecting anything in return. Others endured humiliation, violence, and public shame simply to protect their children from the consequences of their mistakes. Hua Jin reminds them that gambling is ultimately a choice. They were given countless opportunities to stop, but they ignored every warning sign until their addiction began destroying not only their own lives, but also the lives of the people who loved them. Fortunately, the court eventually decides on a lighter punishment. Jae-yoon and Songbin are allowed to continue attending school, but they are ordered to perform community service and work part-time washing greasy barbecue grills until they repay the nearly 100 million won their parents lost because of their actions. Their smartphones are also confiscated. To help them recover from their gambling addiction, they are given only pagers for communication. Meanwhile, a new political development begins to unfold. Mr. Hwang, one of the leading presidential candidates, is surprised when he unexpectedly encounters Mr. Choi at a restaurant. From the way he reacts, it seems he suspects that Mr. Choi intends to run for president himself, possibly using the tragic story of his daughter's death as part of his campaign. Rather than taking offense, Mr. Choi calmly reveals an interesting piece of information. According to him, the leaders of their political party are currently holding an emergency meeting. The strange part is that Mr. Hwang, despite being the party chairman, was never invited. When Mr. Hwang returns to his office, he receives an unexpected visitor. The warden of the Juvenile Detention Center arrives to secretly provide information about the activities Hua Jin and the Bureau carried out inside the facility some time ago. Not long afterward, Mr. Hwang pays a visit to Cuchul and offers him the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, Hua Jin and the team begin investigating a new case at Sungyun High School, one of the most prestigious schools in the country. The school is famous for sending a large number of students to the medical program at Seoul National University, commonly known as SNU. To maximize those results, the school even operates a special class composed entirely of students considered strong candidates for admission into SNU's medical school. One of those students is a boy named Hyunmin. During an important exam, Hyunmin suddenly begins showing alarming symptoms. His hands shake uncontrollably, cold sweat covers his body, and he repeatedly suffers from hallucinations. As his condition worsens, and he even starts bleeding from the nose, Hua Jin immediately orders Hanrim and Gundae to take him to the nurse's office. A short time later, Hyunmin's mother, Mrs. Seo, arrives. To everyone's surprise, she seems far more concerned about the exam than her son's health. Mrs. Seo is completely obsessed with getting Hyunmin into SNU's medical program. Even though her son is clearly exhausted and unwell, she pressures him to get up and continue taking the test. She even gives him medication that she claims will restore his energy and improve his concentration. After school, Hua Jin and the Bureau order all students in the special class to undergo drug testing. Almost immediately, several mothers show up to protest. They strongly oppose the urine tests and demand that their children be exempt. Hua Jin responds firmly. He explains that the results could affect university admissions. Any student found using illegal substances could be disqualified from the national college entrance process, even if they have already earned admission. He also warns that both students and parents who refuse testing will face serious consequences, potentially creating even greater problems for their future. Eventually, the students undergo testing at a hospital. Afterward, Mrs. Seo once again demonstrates where her priorities lie. Instead of worrying about Hyunmin's health, she scolds him for ranking second in the class and pressures him to continue taking the medication. His physical condition means nothing to her compared to academic rankings. Mrs. Seo insists that she has sacrificed everything for her son's future. She moved houses, hired expensive consultants, monitored his studying every night, and paid for private tutors, all because she is determined to see him enter SNU's medical school. Her obsession goes even further. She intentionally joined a social circle of mothers whose children share the same goal. Within that group, a woman named Yuna introduces her to a special pill. According to Yuna, the product is a harmless supplement that helps students focus and boost concentration during intense study sessions. Without hesitation, Mrs. Seo begins giving the pills to Hyunmin. The substance was never officially approved or registered with health authorities. Even worse, laboratory analysis later reveals that it contains dangerous ingredients capable of causing severe damage to the human body and, in extreme cases, even death. After the urine tests are completed, the results reveal a shocking truth. Nearly every student at Sungyun High School has been taking the substance. Because the pills contain illegal ingredients, the students could face criminal penalties for drug use. Their parents are also in serious trouble for obtaining and distributing the substance illegally. At the same time, a doctor informs Hua Jin that Hyunmin's condition is becoming critical. The problem is that nobody can find him. It soon becomes clear that Mrs. Seo has secretly replaced the original pills with an even stronger drug purchased from an illegal dealer. The substance turns out to be heart pills, the same drug that Ji Woong and his friends once distributed to students. After Hyunmin began taking the drug, his academic performance improved dramatically. His grades skyrocketed, and he successfully earned a place in the elite S class. However, the success came at a terrible cost. Doctors discover that the amount of drugs in Hyunmin's system is dangerously close to a lethal dose. Realizing that every second matters, Hua Jin and the team rush to Hyunmin's home. Mrs. Seo refuses to open the door. Inside, Hyunmin has become completely dependent on the drug, and his condition continues to deteriorate. With no time to waste, Hanrim smashes through a window and forces her way inside. In the end, Hanrim and Gundae manage to stop Hyunmin before he can take another dose. They immediately rush him to the hospital. Meanwhile, Hua Jin stays behind to confront Mrs. Seo. For the first time, he openly accuses her of leading her own son into drug addiction. Mrs. Seo insists that she never knew the pills were narcotics. Hua Jin does not believe her. The drugs were purchased through an online forum rather than legitimate medical channels. That fact alone should have been enough to raise suspicions. Even if she did not know exactly what the pills contained, she knew they were illegal. Yet she bought them anyway. Hua Jin points out something even worse. After taking the pills, Hyunmin's physical condition changed drastically. The symptoms were obvious signs of long-term drug abuse. His body weakened, his behavior changed, and his health steadily declined. Despite seeing all of this, Mrs. Seo continued forcing him to take the pills. To Hua Jin, there is only one explanation. She was so obsessed with getting her son into SNU's medical school that she ignored every warning sign, even when his life was clearly at risk. Yet even after hearing all of this, Mrs. Seo refuses to change her mind. She insists that there is no time to waste because Hyunmin still has to take the National College Entrance Exam and secure admission into SNU's medical program. Seeing that words are no longer enough, Hua Jin decides to teach her a lesson in a different way. He orders Mrs. Seo to live exactly the same life she created for her son. From that moment on, she must follow every schedule she imposed on Hyunmin. She has to eat the same carefully restricted meals. It turns out that Mrs. Seo had been limiting Hyunmin's food intake for years, leaving him malnourished in an effort to maximize his study time. Now she must follow those same restrictions herself. She must also study from morning until late at night with only minimal breaks and very little sleep, exactly as she demanded from Hyunmin. Hua Jin tells her that she is not allowed to stop until she achieves the academic scores required for admission into medical school. At first, Mrs. Seo confidently believes she can handle it, but after only a few days, she is already exhausted. The relentless schedule drains her physically and mentally. Even then, Hua Jin refuses to show sympathy. He reminds her that Hyunmin endured this routine not for days, but for years. And throughout all those years, he never once complained to his mother. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Hyunmin struggles to overcome his dependence on the drugs. It becomes clear that years of relentless pressure have pushed him to his breaking point. His entire life has revolved around studying. Every day followed a strict routine designed to maximize his academic performance, all because of his mother's obsession with seeing him rank at the top of his class. At one point, the burden became so overwhelming that Hyunmin even considered ending his own life. In the end, however, he could not go through with it. As he speaks with Gundae, he admits that he was simply too afraid of death. More importantly, he still wanted to live. Deep down, he held on to the hope that one day he would escape his suffering and finally be free to live life on his own terms. Eventually, Hua Jin allows Mrs. Seo to visit her son in the hospital. By this point, Hyunmin's condition has improved considerably. During their meeting, Hyunmin finally gathers the courage to tell his mother what he truly wants. He explains that he intends to keep studying, but he will not participate in this year's national college entrance process. Before anything else, he needs to complete his rehabilitation and fully recover from his addiction. He also makes another decision. When he eventually attends college, he will choose his own path instead of following the one his mother selected for him. All he asks is for her support, regardless of the choices he makes. After all, he is still her son. Mrs. SCO strongly opposes the decision. However, Hyunmin refuses to back down. Before leaving, he embraces his mother and promises that he will recover and move forward with a life that belongs to him, not to anyone else. Meanwhile, Hua Jin continues examining evidence from the drug investigation. During his review, he discovers a pill that immediately catches his attention. The design looks familiar. After thinking about it, he realizes he has seen the same symbol before in Gayun's diary. It turns out that before her death, Gayun had been secretly investigating the drug. Even more troubling, Cuchul appears to have been involved in distributing it at their school years ago. Sadly, Gayun was murdered before she could finish her investigation or reveal what she had learned. Years later, Cuchul has now been released from prison and allowed to return to school. His return sparks public outrage. Many parents are horrified that a convicted murderer is attending school alongside their children. Fearing for student safety, they demand answers. In response, Hua Jin personally visits Cuchul and reminds him that the Bureau is still watching him closely. If Cuchul commits even a single crime, he will be sent straight back to prison. Not long afterward, Cuchul unexpectedly shows up at the Bureau's office. His appearance immediately infuriates Han Rim. Surprisingly, Cuchul is not there to cause trouble. Instead, he wants to report a bullying case involving one of his classmates, a boy named Song-gu. The details he provides are specific and convincing enough that the Bureau decides to investigate. Hua Jin soon visits the school and questions Song-gu directly. Song-gu insists that there is no bullying taking place. Unfortunately, the facts suggest otherwise. Hua Jin already knows that Song-gu is being forced to provide a mobile hotspot for his classmates so they can play online games without paying for their own internet access. The situation has become so extreme that Song-gu carries a large power bank every day to keep his hotspot running. If the connection drops, his classmates become angry with him. Even with all of this evidence, Song-gu continues denying that he is a victim. He repeatedly insists that nobody is bullying him. At that moment, a student named Chiho and his friends arrive and immediately start complaining because their internet connection has stopped working. Chiho assumes that Hua Jin is at the school to monitor Cuchul. Instead, Hua Jin reveals that his attention is focused on Chiho and his group, who are suspected of being the real bullies. Soon afterward, Goon goes undercover as a student to observe Chiho and his friends more closely. Unfortunately, his cover does not last long. The students quickly figure out who he is. With the operation compromised, Han Rim is forced to step in and take over the undercover assignment herself. After investigating for some time, the Bureau uncovers the full extent of what Chiho and his friends have been doing to Song-gu. Using him as a personal Wi-Fi hotspot was only the beginning. They had also been exploiting Song-gu's online accounts for all kinds of purposes. His accounts were used for food delivery services, paid game subscriptions, streaming platforms, scooter rentals, and even fraudulent online sales schemes designed to make money for themselves. The consequences eventually came crashing down on Song-gu. At one point, he was even physically assaulted after being accused of fraud, despite having nothing to do with the scams carried out using his accounts. Desperate for help, Song-gu turned to Chiho. Instead of helping him, Chiho manipulated the situation even further. He falsely accused Song-gu of sending inappropriate videos to his sister. In reality, Chiho had sent the videos himself using Song-gu's account. As a result, Song-gu became terrified of standing up to him and continued obeying whatever Chiho demanded. The situation became so severe that Song-gu even used his mother's credit card to cover expenses, leaving the family trapped under a large amount of debt. Eventually, after receiving encouragement from Cuchul, Song-gu finally decides to report everything to Hua Jin. But before he can get justice, another shocking twist occurs. Chiho suddenly files a violence complaint against Song-gu, prompting the school to organize a disciplinary committee hearing. During the hearing, Song-gu denies all accusations and reveals that he has actually been the victim of long-term psychological bullying. He explains how Chiho and his friends repeatedly used his accounts for their own benefit, causing him financial losses and endless trouble. Unfortunately, there is a major problem. Song-gu has no concrete evidence proving that his accounts were stolen or misused. Without proof, his testimony is treated as a personal allegation that could even be considered defamation. With all the evidence seemingly pointing against him, Song-gu finds himself completely powerless. In the end, the committee rules against him and declares him responsible for the violence allegations. Initially, he is expected to pay compensation. However, Chiho's mother decides not to pursue the matter further and agrees to settle for an apology from Song-gu and his mother. Although Song-gu accepts the decision on the surface, he cannot hide his frustration. Later, he vents his anger to Hua Jin. He explains that Chi-ho and his friends have been taking advantage of him for years, yet nobody believes him because they are skilled at manipulating situations and convincing others that they are innocent. What hurts him the most is that not even his own mother fully believes his story. For the first time, Hua Jin gives him something he desperately needs. He tells Song-gu that he believes him completely and asks him to trust the bureau as well. Over the following days, Hanrim goes undercover at the school as a student in order to gather evidence against Chi-ho and his friends. Disguised as a timid and awkward student, she quickly becomes their newest target. Before long, they begin treating her exactly the way they treated Song-gu. But this is precisely what Hanrim wants. The entire operation is a trap. While pretending to be a victim, she secretly hacks their phones and gains access to their account information. Soon, Chi-ho and his friends begin experiencing the same nightmare they once inflicted on Song-gu. Their gaming accounts are suddenly blocked. Their accounts are used for delivery services, scooter rentals, and fake online transactions. Money begins disappearing from their wallets. The consequences pile up rapidly. Chi-ho becomes increasingly desperate as he loses a large amount of money and even loses possession of his motorcycle.
뭐냐 니들? 뭐야 이거? 씨발 누가 내려 정지가?
새끼 씨발로.
The next day, he storms into school and confronts Hanrim. To his surprise, Hanrim openly admits that she was responsible. However, in front of their classmates, she cleverly acts like a helpless victim and quietly suggests that Chi-ho should request a disciplinary committee hearing if he truly believes he has been wronged. Without thinking twice, Chi-ho takes the bait. He immediately files a complaint and demands another committee hearing. Once again, he presents himself as the victim and accuses Hanrim of being the bully. He claims that she hacked his phone and abused his accounts for her own benefit. This time, however, he runs into the same problem that Song-gu faced earlier. Chi-ho has absolutely no evidence to support his claims. Soon afterward, Hanrim enters the hearing room sitting in a wheelchair. Hua Jin announces that he is appearing on behalf of Hanrim's attorney, who is unable to attend. When Chi-ho's lawyer asks who this attorney is, Hua Jin casually presents a photo of the Minister of Education, revealing that the minister also holds a law license. Hua Jin then begins explaining Hanrim's condition. According to the report, she has been suffering from depression after enduring psychological intimidation from Chi-ho and his friends. Chi-ho immediately objects. He insists that Hanrim is faking everything because he never physically or mentally harassed her. Confident that he has done nothing wrong, he demands that Hanrim stop pretending. That is exactly the moment Hanrim has been waiting for. She reveals her true identity as a bureau inspector who had been working undercover to investigate the bullying suffered by Song-gu. Meanwhile, in another room, Song-gu and his mother are watching the hearing unfold. Hua Jin then shifts the focus of the hearing towards Song-gu's case. He explains that Chi-ho and his friends may never have physically assaulted Song-gu, but what they did was arguably worse. They manipulated everyone around them into believing their version of events while isolating Song-gu and trapping him in a situation where he constantly felt anxious, afraid, and powerless. No matter what happened, nobody believed him. Even his own mother doubted him. As the truth finally comes out, Song-gu's mother realizes how much her son has been suffering all this time. Overcome with guilt, she apologizes for failing to trust him. The Bureau also overturns the previous disciplinary ruling that had labeled Song-gu as the perpetrator of violence. At the same time, Chi-ho's testimony is officially deemed false. As punishment, the Bureau concludes that Chi-ho and his friends subjected Song-gu to prolonged psychological bullying and caused significant financial harm through the misuse of his accounts. After the hearing ends, Song-gu and his mother personally thank Hua Jin. Hua Jin informs them that Song-gu will receive a completely new identity number and replacement accounts so he can finally move on from everything that happened. That night, however, a much darker truth is revealed. It turns out that Cuchul has been manipulating Chi-ho from the very beginning. Cuchul was the one who initially reported Chi-ho as a bully. He also encouraged Chi-ho to request the disciplinary hearing and present himself as the victim. After finally revealing his true intentions, Cuchul does something shocking. Without warning, he pushes Chi-ho off the school rooftop. The following day, Cuchul meets with Mr. Huang and hands over an audio recording. In the recording, Chi-ho claims that his life has been ruined by the Bureau. According to the story that quickly emerges, Chi-ho attempted to take his own life by jumping from the school roof. Mr. Huang is visibly shocked and immediately suspects that Cuchul may have played a role in the incident. He even brings up the effort he made to secure Cuchul's release from prison. Cuchul responds with a startling confession. He reveals that he has been manipulating Mr. Huang all along. The prison warden who approached Mr. Huang earlier did so under Cuchul's instructions. From the beginning, Cuchul deliberately used Mr. Huang's political influence to help secure his release. The reason was simple. Both of them shared the same objective. They wanted the bureau destroyed. Driven by his presidential ambitions, Mr. Huang quickly heads to the hospital where Chiho lies in a coma. With Mr. Choi and countless reporters gathered around, Mr. Huang publicly plays the audio recording. Within hours, the recording spreads across the entire country. Public opinion immediately begins to turn against the bureau. Many people start questioning whether the bureau's methods pushed a student to attempt suicide after being accused of bullying. Hua Jin, however, refuses to accept that explanation. He does not believe Chiho tried to end his own life. Instead, he becomes increasingly convinced that Cuchul is behind everything. Looking back, too many events seem suspicious. Cuchul's sudden parole, his unexpected bullying report, and now his apparent campaign for justice on behalf of Chiho all seem carefully designed to shift public blame onto the bureau. There is another reason for Hua Jin's suspicion. He already knows that Cuchul was involved in distributing illegal drugs at school 2 years earlier. When confronted about it, Cuchul does not even bother denying the accusation. Instead, he openly challenges Hua Jin to find proof. Cuchul is completely confident that no evidence remains. Then he brings up a name that immediately strikes a nerve: Gayun. According to Cuchul, Gayun was a good teacher. Her only mistake was getting involved in things that were none of her business. The story then flashes back to the past and reveals the truth about Cuchul. Back then, Gayun genuinely cared about him. At the time, Cuchul was known as a troubled student who frequently skipped school and got into fights. Initially, Gayun assumed he was simply going through the usual rebellious phase that many teenagers experience. Everything changed one day when she accidentally discovered drugs hidden inside his bag. The truth was far more serious than she had imagined. Cuchul was not just a delinquent student. He was a drug dealer. He had been selling illegal substances to students throughout the school. This revelation also exposes another lie. Cuchul was never the bullying victim he claimed to be during his trial. In reality, he murdered Gayun because she threatened to expose his criminal activities. Even after being sent to prison, Cuchul never truly stopped. He continued operating his drug network from behind bars by directing his associates to distribute the drugs to even more students, including middle school children. The Bureau's existence eventually became a major threat to the organization. Things became even more dangerous for them after Ji-won and his friends were caught distributing the same drugs. Back in the present, Hua Jin can no longer contain his anger. He punches Cuchul right in front of several students who happen to be recording the incident. As always, Cuchul quickly turns the situation to his advantage. He presents himself as a weak and innocent student being assaulted by a bureau inspector who is supposed to protect victims rather than attack them. The footage spreads across the internet almost immediately. Within hours, it goes viral. Public criticism against Hua Jin and the bureau reaches a new level. People begin questioning the bureau's authority and whether its methods have crossed the line. At the same time, Mr. Huang takes advantage of the controversy. He holds a press conference and uses the incident to further attack Mr. Choi, Hua Jin, and the organization they created. Eventually, the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. Mr. Choi makes the difficult decision to suspend all bureau investigations and operations indefinitely. Every inspector is temporarily removed from duty. They even lose access to the Ministry of Education building that served as the bureau's headquarters. With the bureau effectively shut down, Cuchul and his organization immediately resume their activities. This time, they introduce a new product known as diamond pills. The entire operation is carefully designed by Cuchul himself. His plan is simple: use students as distributors because minors are less likely to face severe punishment under the legal system. Now that the bureau is gone, he believes there is little risk of ending up back in prison. To avoid suspicion, Cuchul creates a convincing cover story. He tells students, including Songgu, that he is simply trying to earn money by selling shoes. He asks Songgu to help deliver the products. Without suspecting anything, Songgu agrees. The pay is surprisingly generous. As a result, Songgu and many other students become excited about the opportunity. The money motivates them to work even harder, completely unaware that illegal drugs are hidden inside the shoes they are delivering. While the students celebrate their growing profits, teachers begin noticing troubling changes. More students start skipping classes. Many become distracted and lose interest in their studies. Something clearly feels wrong. Eventually, Songgu's suspicions begin to grow as well. Unable to ignore his doubts any longer, he secretly opens one of the packages. Inside, he discovers bottles of pills labeled as vitamins. Realizing that something is seriously wrong, Songgu decides to contact Hua Jin and report what he has found. Unfortunately, before he can do anything, Cuchul and his associates catch him in the act. At another school, Miss Jung begins to suspect that something is wrong with several of her students. Determined to find answers, she secretly follows one of them and eventually discovers a hidden room containing the suspicious pills. Shortly afterward, she is taken to a secret bureau headquarters hidden inside an abandoned building. There, a surprising truth is revealed. Although Mr. Choi publicly announced the bureau's dissolution, the organization has actually continued operating in secret. Even Hua Jin's attack on Cuchul was part of a carefully planned operation from the very beginning. The goal was to convince Cuchul that the bureau was no longer a threat, forcing him to move forward with his drug distribution network and expose the full scale of his operation. After the bureau was supposedly shut down, Mr. Choi secretly sent an emergency message to teachers across the country. In the message, he warned them about a new drug known as diamond pills that had already begun circulating among students. He also asked for their help in protecting children and guiding them back onto the right path. At first, the team fears that nobody will respond. For a while, Miss Young is the only teacher who reaches out. Then something unexpected happens. One by one, teachers begin arriving at the secret headquarters, carrying evidence they have collected from their schools. Many of them express concerns that the drugs have already spread among their students. Fortunately, Hua Jin reveals that the Bureau has already taken preventive action. When Cuchul first sent sample products to various schools, Han Rim and Gundae intercepted the student couriers and quietly confiscated every sample. Gundae even enlisted the help of In-Bom and Song Wan, whose experience extorting students unexpectedly proves useful in tracking down additional samples from other schools. Afterward, Gundae poses as a buyer and successfully deceives Cuchul's organization into revealing more information. With enough evidence finally secured, Mr. Choi holds a major press conference. He publicly exposes the drug network operated by Cuchul and his associates. At the same time, he announces that the Bureau's suspension has officially ended and that all inspectors are returning to active duty. As the announcement unfolds, Hua Jin and the team launch a raid on the operations school headquarters. Unfortunately, Cuchul and his core members have already fled. Han Rim refuses to let them escape. Without hesitation, she leaps from a considerable height and manages to capture one of Cuchul's subordinates. The stunt succeeds, but it comes at a cost. Afterward, Han Rim begins behaving strangely, apparently suffering from a mild concussion. Realizing the situation, Gundae tells Hua Jin to continue pursuing Cuchul while he stays behind to help Han Rim. Because of her injury, Han Rim temporarily loses much of her fighting ability. Even so, with Gundae's assistance, the two of them still manage to defeat the remaining criminals. Meanwhile, Hua Jin finds himself facing a group of thugs loyal to Cuchul. As usual, they are no match for him. After fighting his way through them, Hua Jin finally comes face to face with Cuchul in a school hallway. The location is painfully familiar. It is the exact place where Cuchul murdered Ga-Yun years ago. The story briefly flashes back to that tragic day. Ga-Yun had begged Cuchul to surrender to the police, believing that cooperation might reduce his sentence. Cuchul refused. Instead, he killed her so he could continue running his criminal organization from prison. The murder was never a spontaneous act. He had already researched the legal consequences and carefully planned everything in advance. For years, he manipulated public opinion and portrayed himself as a victim in order to gain sympathy and protection. But Hua Jin is not someone who can be manipulated so easily. He has known the truth for a long time and refuses to be swayed. Unfortunately, Cuchul has prepared another trap. Before the confrontation, he takes Songgu hostage and threatens to kill him. The moment Hua Jin's attention shifts toward protecting the boy, Cuchul attacks. He stabs Hua Jin and forces him against a wall. Hua Jin is ready to fight back, but one of Cuchul's accomplices responds by stabbing Songgu in the leg. Faced with an impossible choice, Hua Jin endures the assault. Again and again, Cuchul drives the knife into him, while Hua Jin refuses to retaliate, hoping the attackers will stop hurting Songgu. Just when the situation seems hopeless, Han Rim suddenly arrives. Despite her injury, she quickly defeats Cuchul's subordinate and rescues Songgu. The moment Hua Jin realizes that Songgu is safe, everything changes. He finally stops holding back. Even though he has been stabbed multiple times and is seriously wounded, Hua Jin overwhelms Cuchul with ease. The battle ends quickly. A battered but unbroken Hua Jin remains standing, while Cuchul lies defeated before him. Even with his body covered in wounds, Hua Jin still has enough strength left to deliver one final lesson to the man responsible for so much suffering. Instead of admitting defeat or taking responsibility for his actions, Cuchul deliberately provokes Hua Jin. His goal is simple. He wants Hua Jin to kill him. For a moment, Hua Jin is tempted. After everything Cuchul has done, ending his life would seem like the easiest way to bring everything to a close. But Hua Jin refuses to let anger and revenge control him. In the end, he chooses to spare Cuchul. More than anything, he wants Cuchul to understand that there are still people willing to care about troubled students like him. People who genuinely believed in him and wanted to help him change. People like Gayun. Soon afterward, Cuchul and the rest of his organization are arrested. Mr. Choi personally ensures that they will be prosecuted under adult criminal law rather than receiving the leniency typically given to minors. The following day, Mr. Choi officially announces the full reinstatement of the Bureau during a press conference attended by reporters from across the country. All Bureau operations are restored, and every inspector is cleared to resume their duties. With the case finally resolved, the team visits Gayun's grave. They pay their respects and quietly share the news that they succeeded in exposing Cuchul's crimes and bringing his organization down. During this moment, another secret comes to light. It becomes obvious that Hanrim and Gundai have developed feelings for one another, although neither of them has the courage to say it openly. The reason soon becomes clear. On the night they confronted Cuchul, Hanrim was suffering from a concussion and struggling to stay focused. In a desperate attempt to snap her back to her senses and get her moving toward Hua Jin's location, Gundai unexpectedly kissed her. Neither of them seems ready to discuss what happened, leaving the situation awkward but undeniably meaningful. The story then shifts to a completely new case. A basketball team captain is shown punishing his teammates through physical discipline. The punishment is viewed as both bullying and abuse, prompting Hua Jin and the Bureau to immediately step in and investigate. Elsewhere, another long-running conflict finally reaches its conclusion. Mr. Huang is arrested after authorities uncover evidence that he conspired with Cuchul and abused his political power to secure Cuchul's release from prison. Even after his arrest, however, Mr. Huang refuses to accept defeat. He remains convinced that he will eventually take revenge and destroy the Bureau once and for all. The story ends on a surprisingly humorous note. As Mr. Huang continues making threats and refusing to acknowledge his mistakes, Mr. Choi finally loses his patience. Fed up with everything he has heard, Mr. Choi punches Mr. Huang and gives him one final lesson, bringing the story to a satisfying close. So the moral of the story is, if a scary guy named Hua Jin offers you life advice, just do your homework and stay out of trouble before you end up doing push-ups, washing dishes, or getting chased across a rooftop.